Hello everyone, welcome to the Responsible Logistics podcast. Our today's guest is Povilas Drižas, Secretary General at International Transport and Logistics Alliance. Welcome, Povilai.
Thank you for having me.
I would like to ask you to tell me a little bit about what does your association do and what is the main goal of the association?
We are International Transport and Logistics Alliance. It's the association which gathers now 25 biggest Lithuanian road transport and logistic companies. And those companies are the biggest one in the Lithuania, and some of them are even in Europe. And our 25 members are representing around 80% of the whole Lithuanian transport turnover. And I believe you are aware that transport in Lithuania's economy plays a very crucial role. And land transport itself is contributing to around 8% of Lithuanian GDP. So the main goal of our association is to make an easy way to work and to provide services for our companies. So let's say our main and strategic points are to represent them when dealing with the institutions of the government in Lithuania or in European Union. So we divide our job 50-50. Half of time we spend in Brussels, half of time we spend here in Lithuania. And the main goal is to work with and represent their interests, their political interests regarding the legislation and other possible issues or problems, and just to make them work properly and to help them. So this is our, let's say, main goal when we do our activities.
And I assume that decarbonization is also a big part of the...
It's a part. It's not the very main one, the biggest one, but it's a part anyway. I mean, you cannot take it somewhere else. I mean, it's when you speak about the transport, the pollution, and the decarbonization comes after it. I mean, want it and you don't want it. I mean, it doesn't matter.
It's there already.
Yeah.
In this case, I would be happy to discuss the regulations and directives that are currently there, because to me, I spent a lot of time trying to understand what's the situation exactly, what are the regulations that affect the logistics industry and transport industry. But honestly, there are so many directives and regulations that it can be quite confusing. So maybe you can help me and the listeners to understand it a bit better and explain it to me like to a 10-year-old about the policies, directives and documents that are affecting the transport industry on the level of, on the EU level.
So let's begin from the beginning. I mean, when the Paris Agreement was on the table, another document or another policy which was related or linked a bit to the transport was a Green Deal, which was adopted in 2019. Then in 2020, there were new studies conveyed, and new studies show that transport in general, combining all modes of transport, land transport, vehicles and rails, or shipping and aviation, are responsible for 30% of green gas emissions in European Union. And when we speak about the heavy-duty vehicles, we have numbers that heavy-duty vehicles from this 1/3 of the whole emissions bubble are responsible for around 15% of the green gas emissions. And then in 2021, there was adopted a Fit for 55 package. It's the package of the legal acts. Let's see, where there were few directives and regulations linked or devoted directly to transport, and especially to the road transportation. Then in 2022, there was a smart and sustainable mobility strategy adopted also. I mean, this is a third bunch of documents which broadened a bit the scope of the transport, and there were few documents, for example, Weights and Dimensions Directive, which is directly linked to the road transportation and heavy-duty vehicles, and then Combined Transport Directive, which speaks about multimodal, intermodal transport, and this directive is linked to the activities of rail and road transport, and it's meant the main goal is to leverage the level of CO2 emissions. Another one, which is also related with this topic, is TNT regulation. When it speaks about the main ways of main roads of European Union, and it sets the goal for charging infrastructure, the safe and secure parking places, which is also not directly, but it's linked with the CO2 emissions and etc. So these are, I would say, main documents which are directly devoted to the CO2 emissions. There are other legal acts which, by the way, contradicts the policy of CO2 emissions, which I spoke before. It's a well-known mobility package, and which is also one of the hottest topics for our association when we work and when we discuss the issues of decarbonization. We raised the question in Brussels regarding the provisions of this package, the mobility package, for example, the return of the vehicle every 8 weeks to the place of registration, which is actually, I mean, it contradicts to the policy which I mentioned before, the CO2 emission, the leverage of the level of the CO2 emissions.
Because no matter the situation, the truck has to go back to the place of registration, so it might be empty as well, so empty miles are not great for the environment.
And as you know, I mean, empty mileage is the huge problem for companies, the trucking companies. We counted in 2019 during the discussions on mobility package, and when the Green Deal was adopted, when the Fit 55 was in the pipeline, we counted only this provision and only this part of the regulation regarding the returning of the vehicle will provide additional 3.5 million of CO2 tons in Europe, only regarding this provision. So it's good that now, I mean, currently this provision is appealed in the Court of Justice, so the control institutions of the particular countries, they are not controlling it as it should, because it depends how the outcome of the ECJ will finish, and then we will see. But I mean, this is one of the biggest problems, and it contradicts to the policy of the Green Deal, with the Fit 55 and other directives and regulations. Because
whatever we try to fix with sustainable solutions, we get back to zero, because with mobility package we
go back to the operational issues. I mean, yep. So with the one legal act, they wanted to make a better place for drivers to work. They wanted to remove, as they said, the bottlenecks of the entry and access to the market, but the result was opposite. So yeah, I mean, we have now few policies which contradicts one to another. But yep, to answering your question, decarbonization is one of the hottest topics now in Brussels, and it's good that I've heard already today that the head of the Commission, Ms. Ursula von der Leyen, is re-elected for the second term, and she is confirmed as the head of the Commission for another 5 years. That means that those topics, those goals, the Green Deal, Fit 55, and other directives and regulations will be prolonged, and not prolonged, but I mean, it will continue to be implemented, and it's good. That means that in 10 years, both terms of the European Commission will help us to maybe a bit to achieve the goals of those programs and legal acts.
Okay, but the documents that you mentioned and directives are affecting the entire Eurozone, right?
Entire Eurozone. However, there are discussions, for example, regarding the Combined Transport Directive, because the Combined Transport Directive sets the incentives for both rail and road transport regarding the usage of the rail operations, and the goal is to make this model shift from road to rail. However, we try to call it not, and we want to call it not a model shift, not to make two separate modes fighting each other regarding the cargo, but we would like to call it shift to zero. I mean, it doesn't matter who will provide the services, vans, heavy-duty vehicles, cars, or rails, it should be zero. I mean, if it's zero, it's fine then. I mean, it doesn't matter, there is no contradiction or fight between two modes of transport. So this directive provides incentives, and it's regarding the combined transport and multimodal transport. So discussion is now about what part of the journey, for example, of the cargo should be brought by train or should be brought by land transport, by car. And it's devoted to European Union, European geographical zone, but the discussion also is around whether, for example, cargo from China to France through the Europe is also liable to get the finance from this directive. So the discussion is about that.
But then I assume that the government has to support the infrastructure development, right? Because currently we have infrastructure for some countries, but not for the entire Eurozone.
Yeah, I mean, infrastructure is the biggest problem, I believe. If we can get the money, we won't get the infrastructure so fast. I mean, funds, programs for funding all those green initiatives, all the scientific researches regarding the new technologies of the trucking industry or electrification of rail, you can do that, I mean, if you have enough finances, but having enough finances won't make infrastructure here. I mean, and when we speak about the hard infrastructure, which is charging points for example, electric vehicles, it's a big problem. So we have now regulations, this TNT regulation, which I mentioned before, which sets out that, I can't recall now, but it sets out some kilometers on the road for how much is the, I mean, every charging point should be every 100 kilometers of the road. So they set the rules, and it's fine, it's good, but I mean, you need to build it. And you need to provide electricity, for example. So infrastructure is a problem, of course.
So maybe you know what was the idea behind the decarbonization plan, because it seems like now companies are pushed to implement sustainable solutions such as rail transport, utilization, electric trucks, and is European Union going to support these companies?
They are. I mean, they are going, and there are a lot of initiatives, and there are funding for that. There are funding, according to my knowledge, there are funding for infrastructure regarding, for example, the charging points on the roads. We have this European funding, and we have national funding. I know that our Ministry of Transport and Communication, they're providing some funding for charging points here in Lithuania. There are also invitations or funding for charging points for the natural gas, something like that, biogas. It depends on the policy, which national policy when the countries decide on where to invest. And then on infrastructure, we can go back again to this combined transport directive, which speaks about the synergy between rail and road transport. And now the current discussions are also happening in Brussels regarding the state aid rules, the revision of the state aid rules, which means that they want to release a bit the criteria for using European funding, European money for providing and to adding some funding to the, for example, shipper expenses. If you spend more money than you've been using truck, for example, you need to spend more money if you want to shift to rail. I mean, they will fund it, and they will fund this gap or these additional expenses. So there are fundings, there are projects, and the idea behind that is to move somehow to move further, because when you start discussions what we need to do, everything, the discussion is going around the finances. So finances, then infrastructure. So I mean, if there's finances, maybe in the future there will be enough infrastructure. And then now, of course, we discuss about electricity, about hydrogen, intermodal transport, but these are, let's say, broader scope policies. We also need to think, and when we also speak with the governments, we say that there is not enough investment only to choosing an option or investments to infrastructure. We need to invest also within our companies. That means that if you have a fleet renewal, for example, to hypothetically, you need to renew 1,000 trucks of your company to EVs. That means that the maintenance is changing. I mean, you need to find people, you need to train staff, you need to change your operational behavior, you need to find a new green operational models to work, to provide services. Then again, this mobility package, for example, rest and work rules for drivers, whether they will be aligned together, whether the drivers, when they spend their 45 minutes of the rest, of the daily rest, will be able to charge the truck of the fully with the electricity. So there are questions regarding these fundings. I mean, so politically, yes, they are there, but it's not enough only to fund the infrastructure. There's a lot of other issues which also the funding should be provided.
And what about subsidies?
So this is what I spoke before. I mean, this is we call state aid. So state aid is then the subsidies from the member states' governments are given to the service providers for the business, and you don't need to get an approval from European Commission.
Okay, because I think this relation is not very clear for me, because there are EU regulations, but then there are some local regulations as well, right?
Yep.
I mean, the EU level and then the country level, it's not the same.
It's not the same. It's a bit different question, but I mean, in general, EU sets the goals we need to achieve through the directives, through the regulations, and their decision. But I mean, mainly it's directives and regulations. So they set the horizontal approach where we have to be in 10 or 15 years. And then those directives or regulations, and it's also regarding the finances, are implemented and transposed into national laws of the countries. And then the country decides, according to their geographical position, according to their size of the market, size of the industry. If we speak about trucking industry, they then decide how to implement that, what finances to use, how to use those finances, how to devote those finances through the different kind of the sectors. But the ending is to reach the goal which is already stated and set in the directive, for example. So there's a difference. But when we speak, for example, infrastructure which is needed not only in the local area, for example, Lithuania, but we speak about the infrastructure which is needed in other countries, this is where the EU finances is coming as a help. Because then in the European Council and in other formats of the Council, not on the Transport Council, they discuss whether to provide some direct funding, for example, for the safe and secure parking places in the whole TNT network, which is going through Spain to Finland. So this is when there is a horizontal project linking a lot of European countries, then it's EU coming as a help. But when we speak about some national projects, of course, then we use our own money, which is also somehow linked with the European money. So there is not a lot member states, I believe, which are using their own budget, their own finances. Anyway, it comes from EU.
Right, everything is connected.
Yeah.
But regarding the regulations and their impact on the companies, for example, the CSRD and its impact, the fact that companies now have to report on their emissions. Maybe you could highlight a little bit the impact, let's say, in short term and in long term on the logistics companies.
It's not an easy question for me. I'm not working directly with the companies, but from the policy perspective, what I understand is the adaptation and the regulatory compliance of the companies is a big issue, and you need to adapt your processes, you need to train your staff, you need to get the new competences from new people you are hiring. I mean, that they could understand that they have their own competences, and then they could understand what they have to do and what does it mean ESG report. I mean, and what information they need to gather, how to gather data, for example. I know that you have a lot of data. I mean, big companies have a lot of data, but another issue is how to use, and I heard that a few days ago, how to use an IT solution, where to find a good IT solution to gather all the data and to get the result of this data. So, I mean, you have data, but you don't have an IT solution to use this data properly. That's an issue.
Especially when there's a lot of data to cope with.
I mean, big companies, they have a lot of data, and this data is very useful, but I mean, how to use it, and you need a special IT tool. It's not a little IT tool, but you need special IT environment.
Yeah, and that's also additional investment.
That's additional investment. So, and then you speak about the money investments. everything will cost. Everything will cost for money. I mean, it will cost for the company. The issue is that private companies, they're using their private money. And then we have a little issue. I mean, what you should do. There is a regulation which obliges you to do something. But if there is a regulation which is there's no obligation and there's an option whether to do it or not, companies tend not to invest. Companies tend not to spend their money because they're thinking about tomorrow. I mean, and this environmental thing is not the first issue for them. So this is also an impact, which is finances. So maybe at the beginning, you need to finance a lot. I think theoretically it will return in some way, but still finances is an issue. Another issue is that we spoke before is an operational alignment. You need to find models of your operational behavior, of your operational service provision when you're providing your services. All these controlling the fleet management, everything needs to be adapted to these new regulations regarding the environmental CO2, the levels of the CO2 emissions. I mean, everything needs to be aligned. So I would say first a big impact is finances, then of course regulatory compliance in general, then staff training and all these issues with operationals.